I am Shusara Kumara. Welcome to Satsang. You are beginningless. You are endless. You are divine.
Good evening, everybody. This is Shusara Kumara, and you're tuning in to Satsang with the Shambhala Center. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. As always, I have PLEN here by my side, and we're also joined by Tim and Linda tonight. We're thrilled to have you with us pre-equinox. The energies are already here, and I hope you're riding them with grace. We're going to go ahead and do a clearing, so go ahead and get yourselves comfortable. Take a nice deep breath. Mother, Father, God that I am, through the great central sun hierarchy, through the office of the Christ, through the order of Melchizedek, I call upon Archangel Michael to bring the sapphire blue ray. Cut away, cut away, cut away anything and all of our four lower bodies not emanating directly from our I am presence. I now call on Archangel Zachiel, keeper of the violet flame. Blaze, blaze, blaze the violet flame through all of our four lower bodies. Transmute, transmute, transmute all the psychic debris Michael has cut free. I now call forth the invincible ring pass knot and the mirror blue light of invisibility to completely surround each of us. And I call forth the shaft of pure Christ light, one shaft to surround each one of us, and I ask that they be brought to the center of the earth, where I call on Archangel Gabriel to seal them. And I ask that the legions of Michael completely surround each tube of light. And now I ask that our vibrations be raised high above the psychic and astral worlds to the highest realm of illumined truth we each can attain at this time. And now, Mother, Father, God, we place ourselves in service to you and to humanity. And I place myself in service as well as PLEN to all of you tonight. We ask that only that which is direct from you be permitted into our perceptions and that all else of the lower mind be kept out. And we ask that only that which is direct from you be permitted through us. And because we have asked this, we consider it so. So be it. Come on back. Lovely. So I think I have a title for our program tonight. We're going to call tonight's show The Path Less Traveled. It's a little play on the Robert Frost poem, The Road Less Traveled. And we're going to talk a little bit tonight about what we talked about during our Charlotte session this evening. For those of you familiar with the poem, in the poem, the narrator is walking through this woods and comes to a spot where there's a fork in the road. And one path is well-worn, has been trodden quite a few times, while the other one, he can't quite see to the end of it. And you can tell it hasn't been used for a long time, and he has to make the choice of which road he's going to take. And, of course, anyone familiar with it knows that at the end of the story, he takes the road less traveled. And he says at the end, and that has made all the difference. So what I want to talk to you about is the path less traveled, which is the one you're listening to right now. The path of dissolution work is of all the kind of spiritual practices out there, is probably the one least utilized because of the challenge involved in mastering it. When we had our session earlier tonight, I started it off kind of asking people the question, why are you here? And it can seem like a very basic kind of question, but for a seeker, it's a very important question. And of course, if you're listening tonight, you would be, I'm sure, qualified to answer to seeker, or you wouldn't even be listening. And it's one that I think is worthy of your attention. So concerning why are you here, and I don't mean on the planet, but let's look at it as far as this radio program. Why are you here? Why do you tune in week after week? There's a reason. And the reason that I asked earlier was because prior to our session, I walked by a room, another room in our suite of offices, and they were doing some kind of workshop, and everyone was kind of standing up, and I don't know if they were stretching or they were making funny noises and stuff, and they were all laughing. And it was obviously an exercise that the facilitator had them going through. And that right there brought to me the question, so why are you here? Because the person who attended that particular meeting is definitely not the person who comes and sits in front of me each week as I do my work. So what makes the difference? And this is where it's so important, because your life as your spiritual path, will lead you into places where you make your choices. And if your desire as a seeker is ascension or enlightenment, or what I would say, if your desire is to walk off the life-death cycle altogether, which means exiting third dimensional reality, then the reason you show up is very different from the reason that the people who attended that other workshop went to that workshop. You see, the what was that I said? It was actually quite fitting. The people who would go to the other type of thing go to, ease their suffering, to learn techniques to, kind of lighten their load, or to become less burdened by life. And what I said to the group was, it may seem a little sick to some people, but for most seekers, you come to me because you actually want to increase your burden load for a while, which is exactly, not that you come into it thinking, I want it to get worse, but in order to see through it, you have to walk through it. And the walking through it can seem to increase your pain or increase your suffering initially, because it's requiring you to do the one thing you've always run away from doing. You see, it's requiring you to turn and face your fears. It's requiring you to turn and face all the things that you have judged to be wrong, all the things you have judged to be bad. It's requiring you to look from another vantage point at every concept you've ever held about what is good and what is bad, about what is right and what is wrong. And that is not something that the personal self will do willingly. If that was the case, none of us would be here. Let's face it. Now, the seeker, someone identified as seeker, is running under somewhat of an illusion that they are doing it willingly. But don't be fooled by it, because the mind still is doing everything in its power to orchestrate the situation. So it plays the game of seeker, right? It plays the game of seeker because it wants an end to its pain. But it's conditional, because the seeker wants an end to the pain while still holding its sense of self intact, and never the twain shall meet. You see? Because the personal self can never experience an end to its pain. Ever. It was born out of pain. See? Pain is its creator. Just as love is your creator, the essence of you, pain, fear, suffering is the creator of the personal self. And you never stray from your creator, do you? See? And so the personal self is stuck in it. It runs from it. It refuses to acknowledge it. When it does experience that aspect, it does everything in its power to get out of it. Right? And because it does that, it holds the whole dynamic in place. That's why for so many people, especially people where you hear stories of what I guess they call it like spontaneous enlightenment, right? Or spontaneous awakening, like Eckhart Tolle or Byron Katie. I love to use them as examples. But both of them were in horrid pain when that happened to them. I mean, Eckhart Tolle didn't want to be alive, period. And Byron Katie, had checked herself into a drug rehab place. She wasn't doing drugs, but the drug rehab place she could get into with the insurance. So she checked herself in there. She had absolutely no self-worth, didn't even feel worthy of a bed. So she slept on the floor when her awakening came. You see, so they were in the pain, completely immersed in the pain. And that was what facilitated the awakening. If they had continued to run in the space of trying to avoid the pain, that awakening could not have happened, you see? This is very troubling to the personal self to hear this, because the personal self is very afraid to not only to just acknowledge the pain, but to allow itself to be in it, right? And for all different reasons, right? I work with someone right now who struggles with it because the belief was imprinted that kind of like that, it's better to be the person, you're gonna, if you fall down, you get back up, or you pull yourself up by your bootstraps, or never does anybody any good to wallow in misery, and, tomorrow's a better day, right? And on one level, that works here in this reality. It keeps the individual from, being on antidepressants. But on the level of completing your work so that you can exit the life-death cycle, it's a trap, a huge one. Huge one. So we have to really look, like, why are we doing this thing? Why are we doing this thing? And I will tell you that the reason to do this thing, is because ultimately you want to go home. You want to experience yourself again. Because this entire lifetime, other than brief moments that right now you don't even recognize where you actually were yourself, your experience has been one of a false sense of who you are. You've been walking unconscious in an unconscious world, regardless of what it looks like, regardless of how much control, quote unquote, people seem to have over their destinies and their choices and their actions. It's all just an illusion. You think you have choice. You don't have choice when you're identified with the personal self. The personal self has no choice. It reacts based on its patterning because that's all it knows to do. It's unconscious. The personal self is not conscious. And I want to pause there for a second because that's really important to look at. Because everyone, we talk about your consciousness, and I'm conscious. Like when I'm awake, I'm conscious. So yes, within this reality, you can be conscious in the waking state. However, the lower mind is not conscious. And for an individual walking around in an identified state, they literally are not conscious. So choices that are made based on the imprinting that took place with that consciousness. Of course, the initial imprinting is the same for everybody. Right? The imprinting of separation is the same for everyone. And that's what collectively we live in. And then on top of that, there's individual imprinting based on your specific story for any given lifetime and the experiences that you went through and all of that. And that's unique to each individual. So you have both going on. There's something that's kind of unique to you, but then beyond that, your overall experience is the experience of the collective, right? Because there's only one mind. There's only one mind. Just as there's only one God appearing as all, right? There's only one mind here appearing as all the individual eyes. And it takes an awful lot of determination to kind of gather enough will to really start to look deeper inside your sense of who you are. You see, it's not enough to just look at the world. It's not enough to just sit in contemplation of what is real, what is not real. These are beautiful things to contemplate, and they certainly can be part of shifting consciousness. But from the place of identification, you can't start dissolution at the collective level. You have to start it at the personal level. You see, when the personal self falls away, then the collective level gets worked through. Not in reverse. So anybody out there who is running on a premise that you can just kind of sit in the conceptual spaces of that this reality isn't real, that everything that happens is perfect as it is, all of these concepts. If you think that you can live in that space and that will be enough for you, for your ascension process, you're wrong. The outside world is just a projection of the inner state of consciousness, right? So your inner world and your outer world is the same thing. And of course, in this reality, that's where it falls apart because of the polarization. The assumption is made that the outside world is separate from me. And as soon as that is held, ye never walk out. You see? As long as you walk through your world, lifetime after lifetime, running under the very basic premise that the outside world is separate from you and that the outside world is happening to you, you are enslaved in that system. So what I want you to do as an exercise this week is to take time every time it enters your awareness and remind yourself that this is all you, all of it, all of it. You see, the unconscious mind gets projected out into the physical world. And so when you're listening to people talking, and you're hearing what they're saying, instead of seeing that as them and their story and their whatever, witness it as your own unconscious projection. There was a movie that came out several years ago. It's a guy that played in Titanic. DiCaprio. He did Inception. Brilliant movie. Brilliant movie. Remember that if you saw the movie, if you didn't, go see it because it's fantastic. But if you saw the movie, they actually have these individuals that of course, they're moving through levels of dream states, right? Going deeper and deeper and deeper. And I love it because the deeper they get, the slower time moves, right? So every level they go, the longer the span of time is, which is exactly what we experience here in third dimensional densification, where time is very long here, right? Because the vibration is very slow. Versus in the illumined worlds, the higher you get, the faster everything happens, relatively speaking. But in the thing, they have these, all the people that would be in the person's dream, they call them projections, which I just love. They call the people projections. And they're projections of the unconscious mind of the dreamer. And as soon as the dreamer implants himself in there and is conscious in the dream, the projections start to look at him like, you're not supposed to be here, And they literally will go after the dreamer, and you can't stop it. And it's brilliant. It's just brilliant. Because that's actually happening on a level, right? The mind, when someone starts to wake up, is like, oh no. No. You're not supposed to see behind the curtain. Let's see what we can do to stop it. And that's what the lower mind will do. That's what the personal self does. It will sabotage your own sense of your desire for illumination. You'll sabotage it over and over and over and over. Because that's what the personal self does. You see, the personal self, because it can't experience truth, right? It can't experience the divine essence that you are. Its greatest fear is its own annihilation. And that's, remember, it exists in the state of separation. So it can only see that, well, if I can't kind of go there, it means that in order to have that experience, I can't be here, which means death. And death is a scary, scary thought. You see. So I'm trying to give you a view into the psyche. And that's exactly what's going on. So it will play the role of seeker. It will say, I want the end result of enlightenment or illumination or ascension or whatever we want to call it. But at the same time, it wants it in a very conditional way. It wants the end result. It wants the love, the joy, the peace, right? The ability to bilocate, the ability to warp the fabric of space-time. But it still wants to hold its sense of self intact. And the two cannot exist in the same space. Why is it that a master will never call himself a master? Because by the time you reach the level of mastery, there's no one to call a master. The master is not the personal self. The master is the self with a capital S. And the self is single. You see. Within its singularity, it is individuated, but it is single. So if you look within, let's see, to try to have that make some sense. If you think of God as a beach ball, And the only thing that exists is the beach ball, meaning that the beach ball is so enormous that like there's nothing outside of the beach ball. That's all that exists. That's God. Everything that God is exists within the beach ball itself. Right? And so you are that. Now, like cells in a body, the body contains trillions of cells, and each cell is individuated, right? Each cell has a specific function, and its function could be different from, say, the cell in your liver, might be different from how the cell in your big toe functions. However, they are still part of the same whole that is the physical form. And within that, they are not separated, you see? And so that is you. That is your essence. You are the self, capital S. But you're also individuated. You know, God created each I am so that it could experience a beautiful aspect of itself and experience all of its creation from the lenses of all of its creation. So in order to move back into that level of experiential knowing, capital K, one has to kind of play the game for a while of being that personal self who is kind of struggling to attain these levels of knowledge or these states of consciousness. But states of consciousness that are attained, that are outside of third dimensional reality, are not experienced by the personal self. You see, because the personal self can't experience something that is outside of itself. And if the third dimensional self is polarized, it cannot experience non-polarization. So in moments where you actually do experience truth with a capital T, that's not you, your personality, experiencing it. It's really not anyone experiencing it. It's you having the awareness that you are it, you see. This is important. In our world, we're so used to the concept of kind of learning things and taking on new information. And that's exactly not what happens in dissolution work. There's nothing new out there that you're going to experience as far as remembering who you are. When you have the experience of it, the only reason it feels new is because the personal self, right, is unconscious and has been unconscious for a really long time. So when the capital S self experiences itself, the experience coming out of it is that, oh, wow, that was amazing, or that was so cool, you know. And then it's this thing like, I have to get back to it. Well, but you are it. See, you are it. And it's just like, it's like you're throwing clothing over a person and you just keep adding layers and layers and layers and layers. Well, after a while, you won't even see the person's skin anymore. But the person's skin didn't go away, right? The body's still under all that clothing. And once all the layers of clothing are peeled off, well, there they are. Did they ever disappear? No, they were there the whole time. And so that's true of you. You know, the essence of you that is divine is right here. It's right here. It's right now. It's in the only now there is. The present moment. But because of identification, you know, consciousness is locked into a linear sense of space and time. And so because it exists in memories of the past and projection of the future, it never will experience now. Even just the physical form can't experience now, because it takes linear time for an impulse to come, in the body and to travel to the brain and then back to the part of the body where the impulse initially hit. Little tiny, tiny pieces of time, but it's a piece of time. So if you're watching and you poke yourself with a finger, the moment that you poke yourself, there's actually a time lag between when you feel it. It may be, infinitesimally small, but it's there. So just within that, you can't experience now. See? Even that's elusive. But outside of the lower mind, all there is now. You see? And it's a very impersonal feeling. And that's not a bad thing. It's so you say it's impersonal. I think a lot of people would maybe hear that as well. Ooh, that doesn't sound very gratifying. But that's not it at all. That's not it at all. From the impersonal place, you are bliss, pure joy. Like I said, you're individuated, but not separated. And it's that not separated part that keeps it impersonal, you see? Because for it to be personal, there has to be separation. And if there's separation, there can't be true bliss. Because any sense of satisfaction, any sense of joy from the personal self is actually coming out of pain, or it's born out of pain, and the experience of, say, happiness is coming because in that moment, it's the lack of experiencing pain that makes you feel like you're in joy. You see? But it can't sustain itself because this entire reality was birthed out of pain and great fear. And I think I can't remember who I said it to, if it was on the radio just now or earlier, but your creator, God itself, created you out of love. So just as you, the essence of you, was birthed out of love and always returns to love and can't ever be anything but love, the personal self is birthed out of pain and will always return to pain. You see? So the impersonal is not the negative thing that you would think it is. It's the exact opposite. So these are good things to kind of ruminate on, what is it that you're seeking? Are you seeking an end to your pain? Or are you seeking eternal life? Because they're two different things. Yeah. If your desire deep inside is for the eternal, pain doesn't matter. You see? Because there's nothing that will stop a seeker whose inner will is driving them toward the eternal. There is nothing that will stop them. And it doesn't matter what level of pain they will move through. Nothing will stop them. Whereas someone who desires, absence of pain, and that's what leads them to God, will have a point that they will hit where they will turn and run away and go back to the way life was. Because you can't reach that level without going through the pain you've been running from. The pain itself has no power. You see, it came into being based on a false perception. So in that moment of the fall, consciousness identified with the concept of separation. It identified with I. And in that moment, the states of mind that came into being led it to the deepest level of pain possible. And once there, it couldn't get out of it. You see, separation was firmly in place. But that concept was not true. So you've got blood running through your body, right? And let's say it starts in the heart and it's moving through the body. And let's say the heart is kind of the core. The heart is God. And there's the blood right there, part of it. And now it moves through the body on its journey. At one point, if the individual consciousness of that blood was, say, down in let's say it was in the arm, if it could look back at the heart, it might have a false sense of being separate from the blood in the heart, you see? But is it really? It's still just as attached as it was when it was in the heart. It just has a different perception. Yeah. And so your consciousness has experienced just that. It experienced looking back upon itself and seeing that as something outside of it. And it was a faulty perception because there's nothing outside of you. Nothing. Nothing. And it doesn't matter how, if God is the beach ball and now you are outside of the beach ball and you can turn around and look back at it. It doesn't matter how far you go. You could go as far as the point where you can't see the beach ball anymore and you still can't be actually outside of the beach ball. That's what we're talking about. That one little concept that you could be outside of what you are is what has created the reality that you are experiencing every day. And I wish it was as simple as just explaining that to someone and then having it kind of lock in and someone just waking up. Wouldn't that be lovely? But it helps to at least start with that. If at the moment of physical death, you can be with a person who's transitioning and you can talk to them and keep telling them that you were never separated. You were never separated. You were never separated. You are God. You are God. And if that person can hold that in their consciousness as they transition through their stages, their ascension is done. That's it. That's all it takes. That's all it takes. However, that's not an easy thing to do. But that is all it takes. Because once one recognizes that there's nothing outside of oneself, it's the jig is up. And when that's actualized, it's nothing that would ever be unactualized, you see? So mentally kind of getting it in there is one thing, but actualizing it, meaning moving it into your experience, is a whole different level. That's what you're all here to do. You're here to actualize a non-polarized level of consciousness here in a polarized world. And when that is done, you never need return. At that point, you actually do have choice. And you could choose to return. Many of you have. Many of you have, walked the stages of enlightenment here on this planet and have come back again. Just because you've been here a while doesn't mean that you've been completely trapped, because many of you have been yogis in other lifetimes. And upon your physical transition, you had a choice, You were God realized, so you did not need to be kind of quarantined to any of the 4 lower bodies, but you chose to. I love when in Autobiography of a Yogi, Sri Yukteswar had a choice. He tells Yogananda later, after he comes back in form and spends time with Yogananda in a hotel room after his death. He basically tells Yogananda that he was asked if he kind of wouldn't mind staying at this certain plane of consciousness to be there as like a messiah, basically. And he said, okay. It wasn't because that was as far as he could go. Not at all. But at that space, when the personal self, because everyone right now probably is having the experience of, are you kidding me? Like, if I was there, I would so not be attached in any way to this fallen world. But what you have to remember is that from the enlightened state, there's no attachment to it. See? There's no sense that this is less than anything else, or that this is bad or not preferable. All those things go away. They just don't exist. Only the personal self experiences preference. Only the personal self experiences the sense of this is better than that, or more desirable, right? For one who exists outside of it in the now, it is what it is. It's now. And there's nothing to bounce that off of, to say that this is less than or this is better than, because it's now. Now. Do you see what I'm saying? I hope you're grasping that. There's no memory to fall back on, to say this is better than that was. There's no projection of the future to say this isn't as good as it could be. It's just now. And that's where peace is. It's just now. So yes, believe it or not, some of you, when you were in that space, chose to come back again. How are we doing time-wise? I have no concept.
We have about 7 minutes.
Okay. Did anyone here have a question or a comment? Anything that came up? Nothing? PLAN? PLAN? Look, say something. Let me get a drink of tea here.
Oh, my mic. I always forget about my mic. What do I have to say? Well, this is my second time hearing it, so. But no, you're actually bringing up some extra stuff, which I think is awesome. Let's see. What else?
She's stalling. All right,
the
fine.
fact that you gave it. Can you actually no, I do have a question. For the exercise for this week,
Yeah.
that you gave us, you said take time so as things come into our awareness to remind yourself that this is all you, all of it.
Yeah.
Can you go into the whole take time as it comes into your awareness? Like, what is everyone trying to actually pay attention to?
Okay, so, for someone this would be new to, it may be kind of difficult to move your mic. I'm getting breathing. It may be difficult to kind of keep in your awareness kind of what the job is for the week, right? Because you're not used to doing it. So that's all I'm saying is just try to, maybe put some Post-it notes around places that you frequent often or whatever, and little reminders, it's all me. Now remember, when we think of it as it's all me, it's all the fallen you, right? It's all the unconscious you. But that's a level of consciousness that's capable of seeing that, and it's an expanded level of consciousness. An expanded level of unconscious consciousness, if that makes any sense. But it is. And at some point, you will really have a beautiful experience of that. So I'll share one of mine. And I maybe have said this on the show before. All my students would have heard this story because it really was a pivotal moment in my work. I was sitting in my office, which had, it used to be one of my daughter's bedrooms, and we put the two girls together in one room so I could have my own space. So I was in there doing whatever I was doing, working, and the girls, I could hear some stuff kind of escalating in their bedroom. They're pretty young. They definitely were at the time. And I remember hearing my husband walk up the stairs, and I remember hearing a confrontation between him and my youngest daughter. And my initial, the space that I was sitting in at that time was very much the space of equanimity, and which is a level that you have to move into before you can go deeper. You have to move into that, that very Buddhic state of just equanimity, where you aren't pulled in either direction. All things are the same. It doesn't end there, but you need to get there, right? So that's where I was kind of sitting. And so I was listening to this altercation between my husband. It was not pleasant. He was not happy with what was going on. And one of the things that, from the personal place that I had held against him for the longest time was that because of his patterning, he's much more vocal about his anger than I was patterned to be. So I was patterned under the you kill them with kindness kind of thing, and you're there to be patient, and they're children, and and yes, that's very accurate and lovely. Well, he was not patterned that way, and not that his people around him wouldn't have maybe aspired to that, but the way he was actually treated was not that. So of course you pick up the winning position, and he was always on the victim end as a child. So what he learned to do was what was done to him. And so he would raise his voice very easily, and he could get in your face, that kind of very intimidating thing. So I heard this happening in the other room, and rather than reacting to it, which would have been my patterning, because that would have triggered me completely, because what would I be seeing? I'd be seeing that, angry is bad, and like patient and kind is good. And so he's bad. And now I feel victimized because I'm experiencing this, and my child is experiencing this, and I want to go in as the savior and do that whole thing. Well, so I just watched it. And in that moment, I recognized something. It was so beautiful. So I recognized in that moment that hearing his voice, that there was no him, that was literally the voice of the unconscious side of me that just as badly wanted to scream at that little girl, you see, but was repulsed by it, so held it out there and had to blame someone else for it and make them wrong because I was afraid to see it. And that's what I recognized. Oh my God, that's me yelling at her. Because deep down, if I let go of all the inhibitions, if I let go of all the this is right, this is wrong, and all of it in that moment, I would have yelled at her, right? but I was keeping myself from doing it. So it had to come up, right? Because I was in resistance. And what you resist persists. And where did it come up? It came up in the form of my husband. And he fell away in that moment because he wasn't him. He was me. You see? It was an amazing moment. Just absolutely amazing to truly see that you are projecting all of it, even the little girls who were going at it, right? As I'm sitting in my space trying to have a very peaceful experience so I can get some work done, what happens in the other room? Chaos erupts. Why? Because I'm so committed to making my space peaceful. There has to be chaos outside of it. Go back into the archives later. Go to our website. Listen to this again. This is a really important experience. It's my experience. There's a lot of power in this if you sit and really listen to it a few times. And I would highly recommend going back and listening several times. Really get it in there because this is exactly what's happening here. And hopefully, if you really sit with it, you're going to feel like that, mind-bending kind of thing going on because it's going to challenge your concept of your inner world and the outer world. They are the same thing. And the outer world falls apart when you recognize there's no outer world. We good? Okay, I'm getting the cue that it's meditation time. So those are good words to leave you with, I think, for the evening. And we will be back with you next Thursday night at 9 o'clock. You're welcome to join us on Facebook at the Shambhala Center and online, theshambalacenter.org. And as always, any donations are greatly, greatly appreciated and tax deductible. We are an official nonprofit. So it's been an honor and a pleasure, as always, to be with you. And I wish you all a beautiful equinox. Enjoy the energies. Try to stay detached. They're a little rough. It's okay. There's beauty on the other side of it. So much love to you. And we'll see you next week. Good night.
Shusara
You are beginningless. You are endless. You are divine.